Hey everyone, my name is Braden Toronto Brooks. I'm the founder and owner of Creative Overhaul, podcast management agency looking to connect valuable information with ambitious individuals. Today, what I'm going to be going over is all of the utilization of identifying, editing, publishing short clips to generate traction back to your podcast. As I said before in multiple episodes, podcasts are a directory that help us push long form content out. But if we do not have a loyal base of people that will listen to those 20, 30, 40-minute episodes, it's going to be very hard for us to share our value. So short clips, 15-second, 30-second, and 60-second clips are one of the best ways for us to showcase our value, but also being able to multi-purpose our long form content on all different platforms. So first, we're going to start off with identifying a short clip. So a short clip is anything between 15 to 30 to 60-second clips that provide the most amount of value for the shortest amount of time. So the natures of the podcast, as I said, anything between 20 and 40 minutes for a podcast episode. It's very hard to translate the value to somebody that is just starting to get to know who you are. If you haven't built that rapport yet, and a 15-second to 30-second clip is much easier to digest, and it also might only take 15 to 30 seconds to showcase to a potential long form content viewer how valuable you are. So if you wrote a script, it'll be easier for you to find these short clippable moments because when you're preparing these questions for potentially a guest that's coming on, or even for yourself, like I'm doing, it's very easy to understand where you're going to be providing most value, what answers will come from your questions that will provide the most value, and then you can make those marks while you're making the content so you can go back and find those clips. Edit a short clip after you've identified it, you're going to be figuring out a little bit more about your platform. So when you're editing a short clip, figure out what platform you're using to record the podcast and see if there's any internal software that you can use to edit those clips, whether that is just cropping or filtering down the time. What I've been able to do is I will go through an episode like this, and what I'll do is write out the timestamps, and then post-production, I'll be able to go in, check those timestamps, and make the cuts. If not, what you can do is make your simple cuts from beginning to end. And what you can do then is download the podcast onto your phone or your iPad or an external computer. And then what you can do is from there, you can edit it from an external platform. When you're actually editing the short clip, once you have it completed, you're going to be wanting to add a couple things that make it a little bit more interesting. So, one of the most effective ways to make a podcast clip pop are very bold subtitles. And subtitling is very simply a program or you manually typing in the words that you're saying so that a viewer can read along, and there's always something changing on the screen. So, it's much easier to keep somebody's attention. And also making a good thumbnail. So, in the idea of how we scroll through TikToks or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, you're not really going to be looking at a thumbnail. But if somebody is interested in you and goes onto your page, to select which video that they're going to be looking at, they're going to be looking at the thumbnail, and you need to display what kind of value you're going to be providing to them in the clip through their thumbnails. Once you've created and went through all of these processes of identifying and editing your short clip, you're going to want to go through the next 6 steps of how to fully use your short clips to the most advantage possible. So the first one is going to be sharing your podcast clips. So this one's the most common. So you're going to record an episode, you're going to publish an episode when it's edited. And then what you're going to do is to drive traffic back to the podcast, you're going to create the clip, publish the clip, and basically in your captioning, what you're going to say is blah blah blah, providing value on blah blah blah. Go check in our bio or go check our podcast platform to learn more about this topic. Or the second way to go about it is if this is a very exciting podcast, and this one's a special guest, or this is a maybe you took some time off of podcast. You're going to want to drive the traffic and get people excited before the podcast gets published. So you're going to want to show what is called a promotion or a promo of your upcoming podcast, which would be before you launch the actual long form content of the podcast. So this could be the exact same thing. It'd be a golden nugget of something very important on the podcast, but you're going to publish this before the podcast. Number 3 would be sharing some tips, providing some of your experiences in the industry or the podcast that you're talking about. So, for example, in the real estate niche that I'm talking about very often, maybe you go over some numbers of a new acquisition that you went through, some difficulties renovating in your area, maybe some industry news, legality changes, maybe the Ontario rental market is changing a lot. Maybe that's changing the way that you guys are investing as a business. So those are all different things that provide information to the listener. Doesn't have to necessarily be podcast clips, but you can refer that information back to the podcast and drive some new traffic to that avenue. Number 4 would be using behind the scenes videos. This is one that is a little bit harder to implement because behind the scenes videos are a little bit more about if you record your podcast in person versus an online recording avenue. So if you are actually publishing, recording, editing all of your podcasts at a specific place geographically, it'll be very easy for you to create some behind the scenes content before the podcast actually airs, or before maybe you're talking to a guest before you actually start recording. Maybe you meet up with the guest for the first time. Those are all different types of things that you can record and be able to document for some content that isn't necessarily podcast related, but you can always be able to drive that new audience back to your existing platforms. Number 5 would be posting fresh content, and fresh content being stuff that is about the moment, not necessarily evergreen content, which stands the test of time. Content that is more applicable to things that or people that listen for the week of the month. So I always say this in the real estate game, which is there's certain people that like to do weekly, biweekly, or even monthly updates on the market. That stuff, for example, November of 2022 industry updates for real estate in Ontario, that's something that might drive a lot more traffic up front, but because it is fresh content, it's not evergreen content, the drop off of the content consumption is going to be much higher, but it applies a lot more to the people that are very loyal to you. So, for example, it is November 29th as of now. And a lot of the fresh content that we could be putting out is anything with winter, the holidays, Christmas, the new year. And in terms of that, the content that you could be publishing if you're in the real estate industry could be about whether it's a good thing to be purchasing winter versus summertime. So depending on the seasons, New Year, so maybe some New Year's resolutions. You go over your New Year's resolutions. For Christmas, talking a little bit more about maybe get a little bit more personal about how you're going to be spending your Christmas. Gain that trust, gain that authority with your audience. So when it comes into the new year, or as people start to consume your content, they'll start trusting you more as an individual, not a business. And the last one, number 6, is engaging with your audience. If you have the benefit of having a very engaging audience that will comment, leave reviews, email you, call you, text you, and let you know about your podcast or even your business, you should monitor those questions and comments because it allows you to create short form content directly off of it. For example, on your Instagram platform, if somebody comments on a reel, you can directly reply to them in the same reel format and generate even more traffic for for that topic. And also, if somebody is going to be commenting on a topic that you created a reel from that came from your podcast, now you might have a new idea to create your next podcast episode. So a lot of it can be very compounding, and a lot of it can be beneficial if you just take the time to monitor your audience. We're going to continue to provide as much value as possible. And in turn, if you could like, rate, and review this podcast, that would be amazing. If you have any ideas, just like we mentioned before, you can share those ideas on commenting on our reels. You can share it through our website, www.creativeoverhaul.ca. You can share it on Instagram at Creative Overhaul or the same at on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can comment or DM us on any of those platforms as well, or you can even email us directly at contact@creativeoverhaul.ca. And on that note, thank you so much for listening to our third podcast episode. We will see you on the next one. Thank you.